Have you ever stopped to think about those tiny moments that completely change someone's life? You know, those split-second decisions to help a stranger that end up creating something magical? I've spent the last few months collecting stories about random acts of kindness, and what I found absolutely blew my mind. These aren't just nice stories. They're proof that sometimes the smallest actions can spark the most amazing love stories you've ever heard. Let me tell you about Madison. She was having the worst day of her life. Her car broke down in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, in the dead of winter. It was midnight, -20 degrees, and her phone was dead. She thought she'd freeze to death right there on Highway 35. But then Trevor showed up. He wasn't supposed to be on that road that night. He'd taken a wrong turn after visiting his grandmother in the hospital. But there he was, pulling over to help a complete stranger. I was terrified at first, Madison told me. Here's this tall guy in a thick winter coat approaching my car in the middle of the night. But he had this kind smile that just made me feel safe. Trevor didn't just help Madison get her car started. When the jump didn't work, he insisted on driving her to the nearest town, 30 miles away. They talked the whole way there about their jobs. She was a kindergarten teacher. He restored old buildings. Their families. Their dreams. It was weird. Madison laughed when she shared this part. I felt like I'd known him my whole life. We just clicked. But here's where it gets interesting. Trevor didn't just drop Madison off and disappear. He waited with her at the 24-hour diner until her sister could drive up from Minneapolis to get her. They exchanged numbers, just in case she needed help again. 2 years later, they got married in that same diner. Their wedding cake? Shaped like a car battery. But this story isn't just about Madison and Trevor. It's about how one moment of kindness can spiral into something incredible. Because at their wedding, something happened that started another chain reaction of events that I still can't believe. Remember how I mentioned Trevor restored old buildings? Well, one of the wedding guests was Olivia Chen, a local real estate agent. She was going through a rough patch in her life. Her dream project, turning an abandoned theater into a community arts center, had just fallen through. All the contractors she'd talked to said it was impossible, that the building was too far gone. During the wedding reception, she got talking to Trevor about it. His eyes lit up when she showed him pictures of the old theater. This is exactly the kind of project I live for, he told her. And this is where our second story begins. Because what Trevor did next changed not just Olivia's life, but an entire community's future. Trevor spent his weekends for the next 6 months helping Olivia assess the theater. He brought in his team, drew up plans, and most importantly, showed her how to make it work within her budget. He didn't charge her a penny for his consulting time. He just kept saying, "Someone helped me when I was starting out. This is my way of paying it forward," Olivia remembered, wiping away tears as she told me the story. The theater restoration became the talk of the town. Local businesses started donating materials. High school students volunteered on weekends. What started as one person's act of kindness turned into a community-wide movement. But here's the part that gets me every time. During the restoration, a young artist named James started painting murals on the theater's walls. He was quiet, talented, and according to Olivia, had the most soulful eyes I'd ever seen. James had moved to town after a painful divorce, looking for a fresh start. He wasn't planning to stay long, just enough time to finish the murals and move on to his next gig. But something about the project, and maybe someone on the project, made him reconsider. You see, Olivia and James started spending more and more time together, discussing the artwork, sharing lunch breaks, and eventually sharing their life stories. Their love grew slowly, naturally, like a garden coming to life in spring. It wasn't love at first sight, Olivia admitted. It was love at first conversation that never ended. They got married 2 years later, right there in the restored theater. Trevor was James's best man, and Madison played the piano during the ceremony, a skill she'd picked up specifically for the occasion. But wait, there's more to this story. Because at Olivia and James's wedding, something happened that sparked yet another chain of kindness, another love story that proves how interconnected we all really are. One of the wedding guests was Ruby Martinez, a retired dance teacher who'd been giving free lessons to kids in the community. She'd been doing it out of her garage because she couldn't afford to rent a proper studio. When she saw the beautiful theater space, she mentioned to Olivia how perfect it would be for dance classes. Without hesitation, Olivia offered Ruby free use of the theater's smaller rehearsal space during off hours. The look on Ruby's face, James recalled, it was like she'd been given the world. This is where our third story really takes off, because one of Ruby's students was a bright-eyed 7-year-old named Sophie, whose single dad Nathan worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Nathan would sit in the back of the room during Sophie's lessons, exhausted from work, but determined not to miss a moment of his daughter's joy. Ruby noticed. She saw how he'd nod off sometimes, how his clothes were worn but clean, how he'd skip lunch to save money. So Ruby started bringing extra sandwiches to class. For Sophie, she'd say, even though they both knew they were for Nathan too. She'd sit with them during breaks, sharing stories about her own life as a dancer in New York, her dreams of opening a proper dance school. Nathan was touched by Ruby's kindness, but he was also intrigued by her stories. He'd always loved writing but had given it up when life got tough. Ruby's tales of New York sparked something in him. He started writing again, late at night after Sophie was asleep. He wrote about Ruby's life, about the young dancers in her class, about the power of art to transform lives. He showed the stories to Ruby, who was moved to tears by how beautifully he'd captured her world. These stories need to be shared, Ruby insisted. She knew someone at the local paper, made a call, and suddenly Nathan's writings were being published as a weekly column. The column caught fire. People loved reading about Ruby's dance class, about the kids, about the community that had formed around this simple act of kindness. Nathan's writing career took off, allowing him to quit 2 of his jobs and spend more time with Sophie. But the real surprise came when Ruby's daughter, Isabella, visited from California. Isabella was a successful publisher who'd lost faith in the power of simple, honest storytelling. Reading Nathan's columns changed that. She not only offered to publish a collection of his stories, but also found herself drawn to this man who wrote so beautifully about her mother's kindness. Nathan and Isabella's love story bloomed slowly, through long phone calls and shared dreams of making art accessible to everyone. They married a year later, in the theater, of course. Sophie was the flower girl. Ruby walked Isabella down the aisle, and everyone who'd been part of this incredible chain of events was there to celebrate. During the reception, Trevor stood up to make a toast. "None of this would have happened," he said, "if I hadn't taken a wrong turn that winter night and met Madison." Every act of kindness is like throwing a pebble into a pond. You never know how far the ripples will reach. Madison added, or who they'll bring together. These stories show us something incredible about kindness. It's not just about helping someone in a moment of need. It's about creating connections that can grow into something beautiful and unexpected. Think about it. One person stops to help a stranded driver. That leads to a love story, which leads to a restored theater, which creates another love story, which provides space for a dance teacher's dream, which sparks yet another love story. Each act of kindness building on the last, creating a web of connections and love that none of them could have imagined. But here's what really gets me about all these stories. None of these people set out to find love. They weren't looking for grand romantic gestures or fairy tale endings. They were just trying to be kind, to help where they could, to make someone else's day a little better. Trevor could have driven past Madison that night. Olivia could have given up on her theater dream. Ruby could have kept teaching in her garage. Nathan could have stopped writing. But they didn't. They chose kindness, again and again. even when it wasn't easy. And yes, these stories ended in love, not just romantic love, but love for community, love for art, love for helping others. They show us that when we open our hearts to kindness, we open ourselves to possibilities we never could have imagined. The theater is still there, by the way. It's become the heart of the community. Ruby's dance classes are now a full program with scholarships for kids who can't afford lessons. Nathan's book of stories is being adapted into a play that will premiere there next spring. Madison and Trevor had their first child last month. They named her Hope, because that's what Trevor gave Madison on that cold winter night. Hope that there are still good people in the world. Hope that one act of kindness can change everything. Olivia and James are expecting twins. They're converting part of the theater's upper floor into a free art studio for local kids. "We want to keep the kindness going," James told me. "We want to give others the same chance we got." And Isabella and Nathan, they've started a publishing program for young writers, based right there in the theater. Sophie, now 12, is writing her own stories about kindness and community. Ruby still teaches dance, though she's got help now. "Every time I walk into this theater," she says, "I think about how one person's kindness led to all of this. It's like magic, but it's real." These stories make me wonder about all the potential moments of kindness we miss every day. How many love stories never happen because someone doesn't stop to help? How many dreams never come true because no one offers that crucial bit of support? But they also fill me with hope, because every day we have chances to be kind. Every day we can be someone's Trevor, someone's Ruby, someone's Olivia. We can create ripples that turn into waves of positive change. The theater now has a quote painted above its entrance, one that James added during the restoration. It reads, "Kindness, the most powerful act of art." I think about that quote a lot because these stories show us that kindness isn't just nice, it's transformative. It's not just about helping someone in the moment. It's about creating possibilities for connection, for love, for change that can span generations. Madison and Trevor's daughter won't just grow up hearing the story of how her parents met. She'll grow up knowing she exists because of kindness. She'll grow up in a community that was transformed by kindness. And hopefully, she'll carry that legacy forward. Olivia and James's twins will play in hallways their parents restored, surrounded by art their father created. They'll grow up understanding that sometimes the biggest dreams start with someone simply saying, "I'll help." Sophie will have not just a dad who loves her, but a whole extended family born from acts of kindness. She'll know that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as simple sandwiches shared after dance class. These stories aren't finished. They're still unfolding, still creating new connections, still inspiring new acts of kindness. Even as I write this, I know somewhere in that theater, someone is being kind to someone else, starting another chain reaction of love and possibility. And maybe that's the real magic of kindness. It doesn't end with the act itself. It keeps going, growing, changing lives in ways we can never predict. Every act of kindness is a story waiting to be told, a love waiting to bloom, a community waiting to be born. So next time you have a chance to be kind, to stop and help someone in need, to share what you have, to offer your time or talents, remember these stories. Remember that you're not just performing a simple act of kindness. You might be writing the first line of someone's love story. You might be planting the seed of something beautiful that will grow beyond your wildest dreams. The next chapter could start with you. All it takes is one moment of kindness. But you know what's really amazing about all this? The ripple effects keep going. Just last month, I got an email from someone who'd visited the theater, and their story shows how these acts of kindness are still creating magic. Meet Jasmine. She was passing through town on a cross-country road trip, trying to figure out her life after losing her job in Seattle. She only stopped because her dog needed a walk, and the theater's restored garden looked like a nice spot for a break. While she was there, she noticed a poster for free community art classes. On a whim, she decided to stay an extra day and join one. That's where she met Parker, a local mechanic who spent his evenings learning to paint. Parker had started coming to the classes after fixing Olivia's car one day. She couldn't afford the full repair bill, so he'd made her a deal. He'd fix her car if she'd teach him to paint. He'd always wanted to learn but never thought he had the talent. "The first thing Olivia told me," Parker shared, "was that talent isn't something you're born with. It's something you build through kindness to yourself and others." Jasmine ended up staying for a week, then a month. She and Parker started meeting for coffee after class, sharing stories about their lives. She told him about her dreams of starting a tech education program for kids. He told her about how working on cars taught him that everything broken can be fixed with enough patience and care. Together, they came up with an idea: a program teaching kids both art and practical skills. They now run workshops where kids learn to fix things, from cars to computers, and then turn their broken parts into art. "We call it beautiful breaks," Jasmine explained, "because sometimes the most beautiful things come from what seems broken." The program's been so successful that other communities are starting to copy it. All because Jasmine's dog needed a walk, and because years ago Trevor stopped to help Madison on a cold winter night. That's the thing about kindness. You never know where it'll lead. You never know how many lives you'll touch, how many hearts you'll open, how many dreams you'll inspire. So maybe next time you see someone who needs help or have a chance to show a little kindness, remember these stories. Remember Madison and Trevor, Olivia and James, Ruby and her dance class, Nathan and Isabella, Jasmine and Parker. Remember that every act of kindness carries the potential for magic. Because, who knows? Maybe your simple act of kindness will be the beginning of the next amazing story. Want to see more stories like this? Hit subscribe. There's a whole world of kindness out there waiting to be discovered.